Hi, it's Chris Lipper from On the Bus, and today is our discussion meeting, and we have Amanda Vinot speaking today from Mamiq, and I've known Amanda through two companies, and she's going to tell her story in a general way, what life and business was like before On the Bus and Tab, what changes she made, and what adjustments she made, maybe some of her early challenges, and what life and business is like today. And then she's going to pick a topic that either she's an expert on or wants some help with, and we'll discuss it around the table. And that's what we do on the third Tuesday of the month, which happens to be today. So I give you Amanda. I'm excited to hear her story. She's one of those ready, fire, aim entrepreneurs that I just love. And she is a founding entrepreneur, which is another one of my favorites, that creates a brand and builds it and then just runs with it. So this should be interesting. I give you Amanda.
Hi, everybody. Okay, so let's go back to when I was a little girl. We'll go really, really far back. I was that kid that had a wild imagination. I lived in a little Cape Cod with my brother and my parents and my dogs on a dead-end street, and I feel like every snowstorm, all the snow would be pushed to the end of the street, and there was this massive snow pile, which was probably 4 feet in reality. But as a 2 or 3 year old, it feels like Mount Everest. And I just remember when I saw the snow, saying to myself, what am I going to climb today? And I would just imagine this world that was endless in terms of possibilities and creativity and imagination. And then in the summer, my dad had a wood pile, and I remember being outside and seeing him chop wood for hours, and beer in one hand, take a sip, put it down, axe in the other. And the wood pile became another form of imagination and play for me and creativity. And I would spend hours out there just hanging outside with my dad and my brother and just playing on the wood pile and it becoming whatever I wanted it to be. So at a very young age, creativity and imagination and exploration and risk-taking, that kind of all was fostered in me by my family. And as I grew up, I remember looking around the world and seeing possibility. You know, where other people saw a crossroads, literally a crossroads. I was like, what's down that road? Where does that take me? What if we rode our bike that way instead of the other way? And I was never afraid of the unknown. And I think a lot of people can relate to that in the room today. And as an entrepreneur, you have to be one who's willing to take risks or make that right-hand turn instead of the left-hand turn into the unknown. When I was in middle school and high school, I was an athlete, and I feel like a lot of entrepreneurs that I know who are successful entrepreneurs were athletes. I played multiple sports all throughout my life. I was that girl that would play football at, the dead-end street, the park at the end of the street. I was the only girl on my street. So I'd always play football or manhunt or capture the flag, super competitive. Even today when I go to the gym, I'm competing with other people and they don't know it. So I always wanted to be involved in sports and competition and pushing myself and bettering myself and being the best. And I ended up being the captain of my volleyball team. In high school, I was recruited to play volleyball in college. And I'm saying these things because when you pair creativity and imagination with the desire to be the best at something or to always push yourself towards something better and to grow, I feel like you naturally become an entrepreneur because you want to take risks, you want to keep pushing boundaries, you want to create something that never existed before, you want to build teams, you want to be part of a community, and that's truly where I feel entrepreneurism was generated in me, was the intersection between wanting to be creative and build something and wanting to be the best at something. So after middle school and high school, I went to college. I ended up playing a couple of club sports. I didn't play any varsity sports. I decided to go the academic route. I went into a 5-year master's in environmental science, got to organic chemistry, decided science wasn't for me as much as I thought it was. And then I refocused my major to psychology, but with a focus on business. So I was actually concentrating on organizational psychology. I was in the 4-year leadership development program that kind of coincided with my major. So with the leadership program, my organizational psychology degree, and then a minor in leadership studies, it put me on a path to human resources consulting. So after college, I got a job in Parsippany with a woman named Heather Peckerman. I left a message on her voicemail at 20 years old and said, "Hi Heather, my name is Amanda Vinot. I found you online. I'm really interested in interning with you over the summer for my junior year of college." She calls me back. She was in a consulting meeting. She calls me back and she said, "I loved your persistence and your message. Young kids these days don't call people anymore. They only text them or email them." She hired me basically from one phone call. And that really shaped my career trajectory. So I did a 3-month or a 2-month internship with Heather with a focus on building a high potential leadership program for young girls who had an interest in personal and professional development in high school. And so I did that over the summer. I completed that internship. I graduated college with my organizational psychology degree. I got a job in Princeton with a consulting firm that focused on leadership development and employee engagement. They didn't have an employee engagement specialist. I was 21 years old. I happened to be good at creating surveys and doing data and research, so they put me on this assignment where I was basically creating a division for them at 21 in a service area that they really didn't have any experience in other than training and development. So they didn't really previously do surveys. They put me on that project. The division exploded in terms of the survey work and the training and development. I naturally, as an entrepreneur, got bored and was like, "Oh, you don't want to promote me, you don't want to pay me more, I could do it somewhere else on my own, whatever." So I left that company. I did a little stint of consulting work. I think I was 23 years old on my own. I started a company called Zena Coaching, Z-E-N-A. Zena in, I want to say, Hungarian means woman, and I wanted to focus on women's leadership development. So I created Zena Coaching. It was an LLC. It was the first business I ever started. Realized that it was really hard to start a business at 23 when, hey, you have all these grandiose ideas, but nobody takes the 23-year-old seriously when it comes to training and development. So I decided to go back internal to another company. It was another consulting firm that was out of White Plains, New York. Stayed there for about 9 months, but that's really the job that changed my life. So I was put on a project with Amazon, trying to understand and research why their military managers were turning over at greater rates than their civilian managers. At that time in 2013, they had a really big turnover problem. Even though they were hiring military veterans like crazy, they were losing them at really poor rates. So I was put on that project to understand the data behind it, first-person research, and I became fascinated that there was even a problem with military hiring and retention at some of our country's greatest firms. I just naturally thought that why would a military veteran have trouble finding a job? They just served our country, they had some of the hardest jobs in the world. Why weren't they able to get into a company and stay? So instead of working with civilian HR programs, I actually made a right-hand turn and left that company and was hired by a private equity firm out of Manhattan, one of the top 3 private equity firms in the world. Hundreds and billions of dollars under management in terms of their assets. And I remember taking that job, and a very small amount of me was like, who am I to be qualified to have this job? But it ties back to entrepreneurship because just like what I did at that first consulting firm I worked for, I built a division. I basically took this concept that the company had and was like, all right, we've never done this before. Nobody's ever really done it before in our company. There's no plan of action. There's no blueprint. We want you to do it. I was like, okay, why not? 26 years old, let's do it. So I did it. So over 2.5 years, I took a concept or an idea and I built this incredible program that served, by the time I finished my 2.5 years there, 44 companies, and we touched over 150,000 employees' lives. And depending on what data you look at, there was roughly 10% of those people from the military community. So about 15,000 or so people I directly impacted through that program that I built with the private equity firm. And I realized at that moment in time, if I could impact 15,000 veterans' lives by working with these X number of companies, why can't I do it exponentially if I built my own business? So I decided to take a risk. I approached the company I was working with and said, I really want to start my own business. I want to turn you into a client. Now, this could have gone one of two ways. It could have been bad. They could have been like, yeah, thanks for your time. Nice knowing you, see you later. But they saw the value that I provided and decided to accept my offer of becoming a consultant for them while I started my business. Thus, Millogistics was born. That's how I came to know Chris. So that was in February of 2016. I started Millogistics on what felt a little bit like a whim because I got bored in terms of showing up to New York every single day at the same time, sitting in the same chair, and yada, yada, yada. I also found myself desiring more, and I feel like you can all relate to that as entrepreneurs. You always want more, whether that's more variety in your day, whether it's different clients to work with, whether it's creating new projects or new widgets because you're like, yeah, I did that, that thing for a while, I want something more. So I had started businesses before, I had hobby businesses, but this was really my first business, and I realized that I needed a coach. One thing I skipped over was through that 6-year period after college, I got my MBA and I also got my coach training certification. So I understood the value of a good strategist and a good coach. And I had become part of the Morris County Chamber, met Bill Olderman. He was my ambassador. And Bill introduced me to Chris. And of course, when I said I need a coach, Bill said, I know this guy, you need to meet him. And I'll never forget meeting Chris for the first time. I wasn't really sure how to take him. That was probably around March or April of 2016, right after I started my business and realized I needed some support. And thus our relationship started. I walked out of there a little unsure of myself whether or not he was the right guy for me. But I forget the conversation, but it was very direct, just like you are. Like, take it or leave it, this is or it isn't for you. And it was. It ended up being for me, and I invested in Tab with Chris. And I can honestly say that I don't think I'd be sitting here today. Well, I obviously wouldn't be sitting here today, but I wouldn't be where I am in terms of my now second real business without the help and the guidance of the organization that Chris runs on the bus and the alternative board. Now, that was pre-Mamiq. Let's talk about Mamiq. So
Close Millogistics first.
yes. So what happened was in 2018, I was a mom. I became a mom in 2017. Decided that the community I built in the military hiring space no longer fit my personal and professional identity. And you'll probably feel as you go through life, you start changing stages or communities based on where you're at in terms of your personal and professional life. And I happened to become a mom. And I didn't want to commute into the city anymore. I didn't want to fly across the country and meet with dozens of companies anymore. I wanted to be home with my newborn daughter, my husband, and I really wanted to explore setting roots in my local community. So I sold the business, and that sale took probably 9 months from the first conversation I had with the buyer company through to the execution of the agreement. All through my pregnancy, through birth, and through the first few months of my baby's life. And then I decided, okay, time to sell. So I sold the business in February of 2018, so I had the company for 2 years, and then I decided to reinvest the profit of that company into starting my new company called Mamiq. Very briefly, I had created a Facebook community while I was pregnant called Morris County Mommy Friends. So this kind of sat behind everything I was doing. And I realized that the power of community is huge. And the group grew from 10 people on day one to 400 people by 4 months later, and now, almost 2 years to the day, we're about a week and a half away, we're at 4,500 members. And that's all word of mouth, referrals and marketing. And as I grew that group, I saw a business opportunity, not because of the business opportunity, but because of the ability for me to serve mothers in our local community through the group I had created, but then creating service offerings and classes or programs for the moms. So the entrepreneur that I am decided to take the money from the sale of the one business and start the other. And that business is called Mamik. So I started Mamik in January of 2018. I filed the paperwork to create the LLC. I right away filed trademark applications for the word Mamik and the services that we provide in our community center. That was granted 9 months later, totally an easy process if anybody needs help with it. And then I decided to open a physical storefront in May of 2018. So by the time I wrote my business plan, which was between Christmas and New Year's of 2017 in December, I filed the paperwork beginning of January. I submitted my paperwork to get the lease signed and everything in Parsippany, and then we opened 5 months from the date we created the LLC. So the whole ready, fire, aim thing. Most people take at least a year to open a physical location, especially if they wrote a business plan in that short period of time. So anyway, I brought this idea to Chris sometime in the fall of 2017, and I said, I have this idea, I'm working through the concept. He said, don't do anything too quickly. You're having a baby, you're selling your one business, like think this through. So I thought it through in a whole couple of weeks. And he really helped guide me through thinking through what services we would offer, whether or not, the moms would want one thing versus another. And then when we opened the business, I relied heavily on my board members for their feedback about the operational end of owning a physical location, because up until that time, I had never owned a physical business. I'd owned a virtual business. My employees from the other company were all virtual. So it's basically a retail business. So what was I getting myself into for having customers in my store? What are my liabilities? What should I be investing my money into in terms of equipment? What kind of sales processes am I going to use? What kind of marketing channels am I going to use? All to drive physical customers into a storefront. That was something I'd never worked on in my life. So hugely invaluable to have a board that had that experience. And over the last 13 months, we've had our physical store open. We've served over 1,000 families a month, either through our classes and our programs, our maternity and nursing boutique, our special events. We actually rent our space to families who are having parties. We rent our space to other businesses who are hosting their own functions or their own meetings. So our physical storefront sees over 1,000 families a month, but our online channels have continued to grow too. So our community has continued to expand, and now at this point in time, we're actually evaluating our digital expansion first to lay the groundwork for our physical expansion. So just like we originally created Morris County Mommy Friends to support the back end of the physical storefront opening, we want to expand nationally, but it makes more sense to do that digitally first, and then find the pockets across the country that accept our model, our digital model first, and it creates a lot of engagement, and then we'll open with a physical storefront after that. So that's kind of my journey to where we are right now. I would say the biggest thing for me as a takeaway is just the innate desire to create has always been something that was within me. And I feel like when I am stifled, when my creativity is stifled, I am sad. I am a sad person. So you'll if you know me, you'll know that if you come with me or come to me with a challenge, my mind immediately starts thinking about how can we create a solution? What's the solution? How do you execute it? Because I see a challenge as an opportunity, and I love to create solutions. and I think the most successful entrepreneurs are those who can create something that's never existed before. That's what I love to do.
So I remember something that came from your board was you learned pretty quickly taking advantage of your traffic.
Yes.
Why don't you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So as a business who relies on foot traffic, you need to think through the ways that you can capitalize on that traffic in more ways than one. So for me, we have so many different revenue sources that if we get a pregnant woman walking through our doors for the first time, doesn't matter how she heard of us, but if she walked through our doors for the first time, how can we ensure that she knows about every other service or product that we offer so that she can become a long-term repeat customer? The other way that we had to think was, okay, we're hosting all of these events. How do we capture that audience who's coming into our store, maybe for the first time or multiple repeat visits, but then ensure that they become long-term customers in another capacity? So you always have to think, any business, not just a physical business, but I feel like the stakes are higher with all the overhead a physical business brings. If I can get somebody in the door for the first time, how do I keep them coming back? Or if they don't want to come back again for whatever reason, how do I convert them to a digital client? So taking advantage of having the beautiful physical space, how do we take advantage of that person coming in for the first time and converting them to that longer term repeat customer? And that's something that Chris always asks, like, how are you capitalizing on the traffic you're getting? This is great, you just had 350 people in your store for a vendor event. How do you bring them back? Or how do you make that first time visitor become a customer for the longer term?
I was thinking more also the sponsorship opportunity with the screens and the
Yeah, so that's another huge thing. We're such a community-based organization, and we're hyper local. So one of the values that our traffic provides to our business partners is visibility and exposure. So we actually work with local businesses who have family serving companies, their services or their products, to get them in front of the families that come to our store. And we do that a couple of ways. We have physical signage that companies can place, whether it's like an event flyer, rack cards, business card holders. We do these sponsored by posters. We have 3 60 or 65-inch TVs that scroll marketing and advertising for the families. And then what we do too is we make what I call concierge connections. So say, Sarah, you walk in and you're a new mom and you're like, I just moved into Brandoff and my 2-year-old needs to go to the dentist. Well, light bulb moment, we are partnered with an organization called Pediatric Dental Associates of Randolph. All of my employees know it. Everyone basically knows it because we're very closely aligned with them, but you don't know it because you're brand new. So we actually make that personal recommendation and connection to Pediatric Dental Associates of Randolph. So we have these one-off conversations, and you might be looking for all of the partners that we already have in our network, and we make those personal recommendations and referrals. So anytime somebody comes into the store, we're always looking for ways that we can help them by making recommendations and referrals to our business partners through our sponsorships and advertising that we do.
And where is your mindset today? What are you working on today now that you're on the other side of some of those early challenges? So what's life and business like today?
Life and business today is stressful only because we're still new. We're only 13 months into our physical store journey, which presents its own challenges, but I'm not going to necessarily talk about the challenges, but the opportunity is expansion. So taking this concept, this little tiny created nugget in my brain, and realizing that we've had so much success with our business model already, how can we expand across the country and bring our amazing services for moms and young families to a much broader audience across the country? And that is the problem or the opportunity I'm trying to solve for right now. Is it's a little bit chicken or the egg. You know, do you expand digitally and follow with the physical footprint, or do you find partners who already have established physical locations and bring the digital community to them. So that's what I'm working on right now, and I think one of the things I'd like to talk about for the discussion portion of this meeting is the power of community. Hyper-local, incredibly engaged community. And that's what I have always built and what I'm looking to expand upon as I'm
So
going
before we
forward.
do that, let's see if there's any questions. I know I have a couple
Sure.
written down, but do you guys have any questions? Nothing? No? Okay. So I do. So you said you wrote a business plan between Christmas and New Year's, I guess a year and a half ago or so, 18 months ago. Did you stick to it?
Let's revisit that on a one-to-one.
Well-
I'd honestly have to see.
Okay, because I have a feeling you've evolved way past your original business plan, that you're seeing things very differently
Oh, yeah.
now. And I'm just wondering, so the follow-up is, would you recommend writing a business plan?
I would recommend writing a business plan to the people who are like me that tend to be a little bit squirrely, meaning we have so many ideas in our head and we need to get it down on paper to organize our thoughts. So I don't know if a traditional business plan is what I would create in the future, but I would do some sort of vision boarding where I take all of the ideas that I have that could possibly circle around this one concept and say, what are the opportunities or the potential realities that can come to fruition? And then just maybe do some planning around each of those, because I'm doing things now that were not even on my radar. But I have to say that it wouldn't have been on my radar without going through 13 months
Mm-hmm.
being in business.
And we'll see 13 years from now what you're doing then,
Right.
right? So what I would guide people to do in those situations is, I don't love business plans unless you're trying to raise money,
Right.
but I do like executive summaries
Yes.
where you can kind of outline stuff and swatting it,
Yeah,
and just outlining the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats
absolutely.
as a way of thinking, and spending maybe a day on each one. Kind of thing. But I was just curious, because I'm sure your business plan was A+ college material and perfect, because I know you, but I'm just wondering if that was the best use of energy and time, other than thinking clearly and getting a running start.
Yeah, I don't know the answer for that yet.
Okay, so we talked about the sponsorship. That was the other thing I had written down. No questions out of you guys, so again, tell us the topic.
So my topic that I would like to discuss is community. And one of the things I love to talk about with business owners primarily is how building a hyper-focused, niche, and highly targeted community could benefit your business, because it builds a group of your ideal customers without you actually selling to them. And what happens is they become incredibly aware of who you are, both personally but professionally too, and then they start to support your business just naturally and organically, because you're offering a service that makes sense to them. So one of the things that we could talk about is, who is your target market that might make sense to build a community with? How do you build that community, and then how do you capitalize on the community? So I wanted to bring that to the table.
Okay. Pick your victim.
Sarah. So my question to you would be, how are you building community already, if you are? And have you kind of narrowed your focus in terms of your ideal customer and how you might be able to bring them together as a community?
For me, the community, I think of the people who rent the kitchen. So for us, we do, like, if you rent the kitchen is exclusively yours for the time that you're there. So a lot of what my day-to-day is making sure that people come when they say and leave when they say, and the importance of that. But like, just through some conversations and stuff with renters, someone will be like, so-and-so stopped by, they had to pick something up, or like, they were running late, so I waited for them, and my initial reaction is like, I'm sorry, but a lot of them like that. They like to see each other, talk to each other, and know who each other are.
Okay.
Which is something I'm finding that I never really thought about before. So the idea of bringing them together would be kind of cool. I don't know about creating any kind of community beyond the people who are my clients currently, or my past clients, or my one-off clients
Right.
for the kitchen rental. That I've never really thought about.
So let's explore that more. So, in the state of New Jersey, you have to cook in a commercial kitchen that has all of the fun things that go along with that, all the licenses and inspections and so I'm just thinking to all the women who are in my community who are illegally selling their delicious food to other moms because they don't have access to a commercial kitchen, or they might not even be aware of the laws and regulations in the state of New Jersey in terms of selling food that's produced in their kitchens, their own home kitchens.
I'm gonna stop the recording just so you guys know.
Okay.